Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2007 found footage film Wreck, and this one was recommended to me by Quamonos Joe. I hope I got that name right, because it's October when I'm putting this out, and I'm doing recommendations from viewers only. So, I'm not, this is a disclaimer, I'm not big into found footage. If you've been watching my channel long enough, you know that. One of the big reasons is what it is as a film, as a genre, basically. A lot of the things kind of fly in the face of what I think typically makes a really good film. So it's just because what the genre is, basically, one of the biggest issues for me being pacing. Now, I will say, Wreck was pretty well paced for being a found footage film. So I think this exemplifies the fact that you can have found footage films that have good pacing. It's just the majority of found footage films choose not to do that because it usually feels like they're stretching for a certain runtime. But let me get into my talk about Wreck. Directed by Jaume Balaguero, or Jaume, sorry, I'm trying, who also did Wreck 2, Wreck 4 Apocalypse, Sleep Tight, Muse, The Vault, and Venus, just to name a few. And Paco Plaza, who also did Wreck 2, Wreck 3 Genesis, Veronica, Eye for an Eye, and The Grandmother, to name a few. Was written by Balaguero and Plaza, as well as Luiso Berdejo, who also wrote scripts for The Snitch Cartel, Wreck 3 Genesis, Painless, The Invisible Guardian, The Endless Trench, The Legacy of the Bones, and Offering to the Storm. Interesting titles. To get better performances, full scripts were not given to the cast until like the day they were actually shooting. So they really didn't want the actors to know what was going to happen with their characters until basically right before they ended up needing to actually do those scenes, which I think is a good idea because I feel like that does help kind of promote more surprise in the moment for characters when they're actually doing the acting. I think that's something that did start with the Blair Witch Project, which, really popularized found footage, obviously. So it's cool that they did that. I think they got amazing performances out of this. That's one of the biggest selling points for this film, in my opinion, is the performances of the cast were outstanding. Super believable. I didn't see a single person that took me out of the film and made me feel like it wasn't real life footage. So that's well done. The average shot length apparently in this film is 59 seconds, but there actually is one that's 17 minutes long, which if you think about it, for film, especially for something like found footage, like a 17-minute long shoot is really hard to do just because a lot of things can go wrong. People can flub their lines. Although, if you have good enough actors, you can kind of improv a little stuff if something kind of goes a little bit wrong. And that's one of the things I kind of wonder about this film and found footage in general is how much of it ends up kind of being improv when the directors actually trust their cast. To just kind of be like, oh, here's the idea of what we're going for, make it feel natural. I feel like that could have been done in this, and the actors just really took care of it. The filmmakers apparently didn't really have interest in making any sequels to the film, but then success happened with the film, and apparently it didn't actually get a DVD release in the United States until after the American remake called Quarantine was done, which I find that kind of ridiculous. Should have been released first and then do Quarantine, but I'm not big into American remakes of foreign language films. I just think people should watch the originals. I have not seen Quarantine, but I'm going to assume it's not as good as Wreck, but you are free to let me know in the comments if I'm wrong about that, or if I should check it out. You get a real-life feel early on in the film due to the outtakes that they start with from Angela in the beginning. It's obviously Angela and Pablo, her cameraman. They're doing their reporting. I'm just going to call them reporters. They weren't really reporters. They were doing a different show, but I'm just going to call them reporters for the sake of it, because they basically acted like that throughout the film. But that setup of that's what you see first, and her flubbing lines and oh, let's do a retake, it immediately establishes this feels real. This is real life type stuff. They're not trying to hide stuff from you, so that's cool. The joking around while interviewing the fire chief endears Angela to you. I think that was also important because then you feel some sort of connection to this very important character very early on. And because she's tethered to Pablo, the cameraman, you then feel for him as well. Because, you hear from him here and there, so you start to like him to a degree. But it's really all about her. But she, the two of them are a package deal. So because you're really caring about her in the film, you're also really caring about him. And to show her being kind of lighthearted and funny, something people can really identify with in a person, I think that was a really smart move to kind of get the audience on her side very, very early. It's funny that they say that not much typically happens with the firemen when they're there because, as you know, as an audience member, when you're watching this, a lot's about to happen. It's about to get crazy. So it is kind of this wink to the audience, I feel like, where it's not a lot happens, but tonight, yes, it will get crazy. They do a good job of capturing the quick jump to action once a call actually comes in. You feel kind of everything pick up very suddenly in the firehouse, and everyone's scrambling to get things done. The camera work works with that, and then just jumping into the fire truck and, getting on their way there. And that's one of the other big things with this, I think. And I think it's partially because they did a good job with the pacing. They don't let scenes go on way too long without actual good acting that's adding something. They do a great job of kind of capturing chaos and tension in the moment. So I think it's quite good. When you get that first quick look at Conchita, who's the first infected person, the old lady in the apartment, she looks a bit messed up, but you don't really know what's happening since it's just kind of a very quick look at her. So it kind of piques your interest. It starts that intrigue that you're okay, that's something kind of crazy. What is really going on here? So kind of makes you lean forward in your seat a bit and kind of become even more engaged. You're here we go. Let's get this going. And that's obviously where things start to really go, which, great job. They didn't wait too long to get into something like that. They established the characters well enough, then they're pretty much just jumping right into the craziness, which that's why I'm saying the pacing is actually very well done. Then the biting starts, and you know that this is kind of a zombie film, I guess, and let me know if I'm wrong on this. From the end of the film, it seemed like what they were getting at was that there was a viralization of possession, in essence. That, it started with someone who was possessed, and then there was a mutation in a virus that then turned possession into, a zombie outbreak, in essence. Which is a very cool, interesting concept, in my opinion. I don't know how you come up with that concept in the first place, but it's pretty interesting. It feels kind of gross and immoral when Angela and Pablo hurry to try and capture footage of the policeman bleeding out after he's bitten by Conchita. That's kind of one of those moments. I don't know if it was just me, but it just kind of felt like something terrible's happening to this guy. He could die, but they're so focused on capturing the footage. And that's kind of one of the things that just kind of bothers me sometimes here and there with the job of reporting. And I will say this is as someone who was a reporter at one point for a local newspaper. You are just supposed to, and that this is how journalism works. You're supposed to just be there and be an observer, so you're not really supposed to get involved. Obviously, that changes for Angela and Pablo because they have nowhere else to turn. They have to. They have to do something at some point. But it feels gross early on that they're just so focused on getting footage. Especially, it's very much seen, too, in that scene with them trying to interview the little girl and the mom's trying to get involved. And they just, break from it. And they're just we need you not to speak right now. And it was kind of rude the way that was done. So that was another moment that made you feel oh, this is kind of gross. It does appear that they make the camera work too shaky at times, because if you're actually trying to capture this footage, the cameraman would actually be trying to get steady shots. This is one of my problems with the film. There are moments where it's shaky, but it's very justified because they're going up and down stairs, people are knocking into them, stuff like that. But there are also moments where the cameraman could and would be just standing still, but it's still moving like crazy. So those moments I don't think should have been like that. I think they need to do a better job in actually having the cameraman try to get steady shots in those moments, because that's more realistic. I'm sure, maybe a lot of people didn't even think about that type of thing, but when you watch a film the way I watch it for, analyzing and doing a review on it, you see those things. They kind of stand out. Things feel very fast-paced, chaotic, and a bit confusing, which actually really does help to the craziness of the situation. Like I said, it also helps with the pacing. It keeps things moving because it keeps you pretty engaged. There aren't very many moments where I felt like I was getting a little bit bored. That said, I also kind of feel like a lot of the times found footage does kind of repeat itself a lot because of what the genre is. And this one did some of that, but not nearly as much as your typical found footage film. Pretty unexpected when the fireman falls through the center of the stairwell. That was cool. That was great. That was a wonderful potential jump scare. It didn't it didn't effectively give me a jump, but I could see where it would do that for people, and it came out of nowhere. They set that up really well. I get the inquisitive nature of the reporting, but going off on their own doesn't really seem very smart. It seems like, maybe you can explain it as they're just trying to get the extra footage. Like, they're so unbelievably focused on doing the job that they're not really thinking about their own safety, or, should they actually be breaking away from the group where there's, kind of more safety in numbers to a degree, and going off doing their own thing. So it just felt like this is not a good choice. As soon as you learn that they're locked in, things really do start to feel like crazy and hopeless and kind of claustrophobic, to be honest, especially when you know that this isn't a very huge building. Yes, it has a lot of levels to it, but it's still not that big of a building as you see, like, going up and down the stairwell. And then also, like, the moment where you know that, like, the police are out there keeping them inside, and they throw that, like, saran wrap, it's not saran wrap, like the tarp, kind of, that, like, see-through tarp, like, over the building. Then you're just like, oh, this is getting a little claustrophobic. It did seem suspicious immediately to me that they were talking about that little girl being sick. So obviously in the end you find out, oh, she was also infected. Very effective when she turns and starts going after people, which those are kind of hard scenes to handle because people need to get a little bit rough and things need to be kind of crazy, and it's a child actor. So I don't know how they handled that. They made it look crazy. They made it look like she was very aggressive, like she was potentially manhandled at parts. So I hope things were handled well with that child actress, but you never know. You're always going to have that person who wants to be on camera, like Cesar, the character of Cesar, and inevitably they're going to talk trash about their neighbors. I thought that was kind of a slightly comedic moment that got thrown in there that I enjoyed to a degree. And I was like, oh yes, this type of person. Every neighborhood basically has that type of person. And pause for horror hydration. Yeah, gotta keep things moving. Once the family says the grandfather is still upstairs, you know there will be something wrong with him. Basically, at this point, if you're not with the group, there's going to be something wrong with you. And I'm sure most of the people in the audience kind of feel that way as the film progresses, because that's kind of what ends up happening anyway. So, yeah. The inspector giving the story of the infected dog is important to set up the expectation of what happens with the infections. That was a really key moment where it's explaining to the audience while explaining to the characters. So it was smartly done in that sense. Like, they didn't kind of like take you out of the whole found footage thing to explain to you how the infection works. And it's very important for the audience to know how the infection works, because then once a character you care about actually starts to show signs of being infected or has just been bitten, because you know that's how it's transmitted at this point, you're already thinking, oh no, I know what this means. And you're already thinking about the steps that are basically horrible steps that are going to happen to this person. Nice touch having the kid turn suddenly, and you really don't know that it's coming at that moment. Much like the body of the fireman falling down the center of the stairwell, very similar situation there. Good jump scare when Pablo turns on the light and the infected lady is right in his face. That got me as well. That actually gave me a little bit of a jump scare, so that was very effectively done. Stuff like that is wonderful. I love it, love it, love it. And the fact that she was so close and she already had like blood coming out of her mouth, super effective. They got what they wanted. I do like the scene of all the infected people running up the stairs because it captures a very intense moment very well. It also, at that moment, is feeling claustrophobic because these two individuals, the reporters, are forced all the way up to the top. They're going to the penthouse at this point. There's nowhere else to go. Where are they going to go? They can't go anywhere. So at this point, you're already starting to feel that they're cornered. And then you have all these, zombie-ish people running up the stairs at the same time to, like, take even more space away from them. Increases that claustrophobic feeling. Very good at kind of driving the tension up and just making you feel just scared for these characters. The look and slow exploration of the penthouse I really enjoy. It's very well done, especially when the light goes out and then they need to switch to night vision mode, and then the field of vision is further consolidated. It's just like this hole in the middle and you're seeing plenty of black space around the outsides of your screen. That just makes things even more intense. Plus the fact that with the night vision, the lighting's lower, so you're more apt to have things sneak up on you, basically. And that's the characters, and that's you as an audience member at the same time. While in night vision mode, the shadow standing still and then suddenly moving is phenomenal. Probably my favorite moment of the film, because it is so creepy. I've seen that done in films before where you put a shot on a certain location and the person is already standing there, like as a shadow, like kind of blending in. So you don't see them at first, and then they move, and then you're just like, oh my gosh, they were there the whole time. Like, it is such a creepy thing when it's pulled off properly, and I think they pulled it off extremely well in this. And it's not just because of how they shot it and how they lit it, or didn't light it that much, but it's also the shape of the emaciated woman that they have as the actress for that character. That adds to it too, because she's very like tall and long and slender and creepy looking. The emaciated woman with the hammer. Oh yeah, and she was holding a hammer too. That's the other thing. Like that sends it to the next level, to be honest. Like when you notice she's holding something and it looks like a hammer, like that's even more messed up. The emaciated woman with the hammer is very effectively scary. Then adding the limited focus from the night vision kicks it up another notch. And it leads to a good ending. It feels very violent. They did a really good job with the sound design at the ending with kind of the hammer attack. And how they had the camera kind of fall and it's just kind of like focused the way it is. And then Angela's, face gets, flies into the camera and then she kind of gets pulled away. Very effective ending. And it's on a downer, like, how did you think going into this film it was going to end? Did you think you would get a nice kind of like happy ending to it? I thought you probably wouldn't because of the whole situation, and I'm glad that you didn't get a happy ending because it's more realistic. It feels more found footage that way. The audio getting blown out at times from screaming is annoying. I understand that it's kind of like you just use the camera work that would have been used. That's going to happen because it's found footage, but you can keep those things from happening, and I think they should have kept those things from happening because it just sounds terrible. Blowing out the audio sounds awful. This has some of the best found footage pacing I've ever seen. Gonna reiterate that. The best found footage pacing I've seen. And the cast, gonna reiterate, did a phenomenal job in this. A lot of great technical things coming together for, a found footage film. The advantage of found footage here is the immersive feel of the unfolding story where you, as an audience member, can't know more than the characters in front of the camera or near the camera. Like, literally, wherever the cameraman, Pablo, goes, that's where you can get information from. So whatever he's seeing through the camera or whatever he's being told or whatever he's overhearing or creeping in and spying on, that's what you're going to get. So that's one of the great things about found footage, potentially, if it's done right, is that it limits the knowledge of the audience. So it kind of forces you to bond with the characters even more because, like, you feel like you're them in a sense. Especially because you've got this POV shot throughout the entire thing. Like, it feels like it's your vision, like that's you looking around in a sense. Something interesting to consider is that you don't need great practical effects with this type of camera work. Just good enough is more than effective. And they do end up showing some moments where there was some decent practical effects, but really you just don't need it as long as you just kind of like quickly show blood, which they did a few times. And I guarantee in those moments it wasn't anything like practical effects elaborately done, because you don't need it. So that is one of the advantages that I hadn't thought about that as far as found footage goes, but I did once I was watching this film. So just an interesting thing I want to throw out. For me, at some point, all the shaky camera action scenes do start to feel and look alike. I will say that. And that's not a knock against the people who made Rec. That's a knock against found footage as a genre. Like, that's just something that gets to me. But I understand it. Like, especially in these situations, what they're setting up story-wise, like, it would be shaky. Although, like I said, there would be moments where they were trying to stabilize the camera a lot more, and they weren't doing that. So, you know. So, ratings-wise, out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I feel like as like an overall film, I want to give it 3.5 stars. But as like a found footage film, and the fact that it impressed me to the degree that it did, I think I want to give it 4. So I'll just go ahead and say 4 stars on that. It is well done. It's definitely one of the best found footage films I've ever seen. Typically, for me to like found footage, it needs to be in like an anthology format, because then it doesn't feel like those are like stretched out too much, and the pacing has a better chance to be good. The fact that they did really good pacing with this in an hour and 18-minute film with credits on the runtime speaks volumes. Also, I like the fact that they didn't try and stretch it to that hour and a half. Just take as much time as you need. And I feel like they just took as much time as they needed. I even think they could have probably taken a little bit more time, but they chose not to. And I appreciate that choice. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this film. Go ahead and put it in the comments. Like it, hate it, in between. I've only heard good things about it before anyway. But if you have a different opinion, love to hear it. Do me a favor, hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. It is quick, painless, costs you nothing, and it really helps me out. Keeps me motivated to keep doing these things. I really, really appreciate it. Also, hit the notification bell button, because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm doing at least 4 a week, which I think is a good amount. Putting in work, you know? Regardless, thanks very much for taking your time to watch this video, and until next time, keep it brutal.